Some alt-right boosters are just sidestepping this week's disappointing stories. Other previously staunch Trump-boosting commentators are showing a willingness to change their tune, especially when it comes to Attorney General Jeff Sessions. For example, Rush Limbaugh called out the president for tweet-shaming Sessions, calling Sessions a stand-up guy.
It's also kind of a little bit discomforting, unseemly for Trump to go after such a loyal supporter this way, especially when Sessions made it obvious he's not going to resign.
There's a fascinating thing happening, these conservative media divisions. Just hours after the Senate failed to repeal Obamacare, conservative media voices, outlets like Drudge, Breitbart, and Fox News, they weren't pointing the finger all at Trump. Instead, they were really blaming a handful of GOP holdouts. But there are issues where we are seeing divisions. We are seeing examples of prominent voices expressing concerns about the president. So talking about that, whether there really is a rift here, are our two guests who come at this from different perspectives. Jennifer Rubin, a writer of the Right Turn blog for the Washington Post, and John Phillips, a CNN political commentator and talk radio host who joins us from Politicon in Pasadena. John, you were there. You were going to be interviewing Scaramucci on stage, but then he withdrew. Is that right?
That's right. Bigger name line, too. He decided to stay in Washington, D.C. at the last minute, which is unfortunate because I had a lot of really fantastic questions for him.
I bet you did. One question I have for you, John, someone who I think of as a pro-Trump voice, someone who tries to channel supporters of the president. Are you sensing from your radio callers, from your columnists in the paper, some discontent from your audience? Are you trying to channel that?
Well, I don't think there's any big surprise as to what he's doing on Twitter. I don't think that he's being inconsistent with how he behaved as a candidate. I didn't think that once he became president, he'd start tweeting out pictures of kittens and potted plants. Twitter is a Festivus airing of the grievances for Donald Trump. He's continuing to do so. Now, I do believe you're onto something with Sessions, because Sessions is not just some guy that he hired. He's not just some random political person that he filled a slot with. Sessions is a guy that was with him from day one, and not just providing an endorsement, also giving him street cred. If you care about immigration, if you're a hawk on immigration, Jeff Sessions came out and said, I've been fighting this battle for years and years and years. This guy is not a flake. This guy is the real deal. If you care about immigration reform and you want to make sure that Trump's policies are enacted, you need Jeff Sessions at the Department of Justice. So I think a lot of people who took that endorsement and who took that stamp of approval are now looking at this and saying, wait a minute, if Sessions goes, does that mean Trump is going to flip on immigration? Does that mean Trump is going to evolve on that particular subject? I think Rush is right. He should stay away from Jeff Sessions.
Since this was a profane week, Jennifer, referring to Scaramucci in particular, you argued in a column earlier this week that Trump supporters who look the other way are enabling him. Let's put part of your column on screen. You said the Trump administration is a clown show, but it's the evangelicals who supplied the tent, red noses, and the floppy shoes. Each day presents a new insult to the office of the presidency and a repudiation of civilized behavior. I know John may disagree with you on that, but your point here as a conservative is very critical of President Trump, is that there's a lot of blame to go around. But when you write these columns, is there a difference in the reaction than there was, say, 5 or 6 months ago? Are you finding more conservatives starting to agree with you?
I think there's a very small segment of the conservative base that is becoming alarmed. It's not the majority. He still has most of those people right in his corner. But I think there is a small segment that is beginning to wonder that not only is this going to have bad ramifications for their agenda, John mentioned immigration, but that this is a chaos show, that what they thought they were going to get, which was a disruptor, is actually someone who is disruptive himself. And that this is not what they imagined would happen, that, in fact, this has not been a distraction. This has not been a way to tease the media. This is who he is, and it has backfired spectacularly. So I think there's real concern as to whether we're now seeing just a snowball rolling downhill, that poor General Kelly is not really going to be able to bring too much rigor to the process because he can't bring any rigor to Donald Trump. So I think what you see is the beginnings of real deep concern and worry. I think until this week, there was still hope that they could get health care done. I think there are people now wondering whether they're even going to get tax reform done. There is just chaos right now.
Here's perhaps another example of beginnings of concern. Let me read this to you, John. This is from the Wall Street Journal editorial board over the weekend. Remember, a Rupert Murdoch-owned paper, a conservative-leaning editorial board, saying the following at the end of the column. Trump has a soft spot for military men, so perhaps he'll listen more to Mr. Kelly. He'd better, because on the present course, his presidency is careening toward a historic reputation where names like Jimmy Carter and Richard Nixon resign. When you hear that, John, when you hear the Nixon comparisons come up from the Journal editorial board, how do you react?
Well, I would say there's a big difference between the Wall Street Journal and Fox News. The Wall Street Journal never warmed up to Donald Trump in ways that, say, Fox and Friends or Sean Hannity on Fox News did. So I do certainly think there is a distinction there. Look, I think that health care reform is something that he's going to have to go back to. They're going to have to be able to push this thing through. I don't think it's been the disaster that has been described in the Wall Street Journal. The fact that he got Neil Gorsuch on the Supreme Court, the fact that illegal immigration has fallen off a cliff, the fact that the stock market's high are all good signs. He does need a major legislative victory. I thought that might come with health care. He came up one vote short. He needs to go back and do some arm twisting, do some deal making, and get that vote through.
Jennifer, does this all come down to what John McCain said earlier in the week, that it is about radio hosts, TV hosts, and bloggers who will support the president sort of at all costs, who won't show the shades of gray that I think John was just referring to? That as long as there are those voices that are so loud and vitriolic that the president feels he has the support he needs?
Well, I think this is a sort of enabling relationship. They support him, but then he feeds the beast. So I don't want to let him off the hook and say, well, if it weren't for those people out there in media land, then he behaved more sanely. I think it's really a codependent relationship, and that's bad for the country. I do think, however, that at least for now, General Kelly is not going to be able to fix the main problem, and that is the president's inability to say on point, on message, coherent, day-to-day press for the issues he wants. And frankly, going back to health care, that's going to create a huge rift all over again with the Republican Senate. They want no part of this anymore. They see that this is a failure, and they are dying to get on to things like the budget, the debt ceiling. And if they don't deal with those issues, we're going to have another explosion, another calamity come in September when we reach the end of the fiscal year.
A preview of the reality show to come. Jennifer, John, thank you. John, enjoy the conference.
Thank you very much.
Coming up next here, my essay about President Trump and Fox and Friends. With great power comes great, you know the end of the line. We'll be right back.